to get you, Barbara.
Ever played Skin the Cat?
Someone's in the back seat! Tell me where you are, John!
Wolfman's got Nards!
Hi guys, my name is Barry and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the top 10 worst horror movies of 2022. I don't generally love to do these videos because not only is it a shame for the directors that we're belittling, or not belittling them, at least their movies, but it is quite hard because sometimes you don't see 10 bad horror movies in a year because you tend to avoid the really bad ones. But luckily in 2022, horror movies have been so strong this year that my top 10 worst movies consist of 3 movies that I actually enjoyed. There's only 7 on this list that I thought were pretty bad. And as always guys, before we begin the top 10 worst, this is just my opinion. Your opinion might be different. There might be some horror movies on this list that might have made your top 10 best of the year. That's just how opinions work. And at number 10 is Hellraiser. Now again, this is a movie that I enjoyed. The only reason it's on the bottom 10 is because I didn't see enough bad horror movies of 2022, and that's why this year is so strong. But Hellraiser was a decent film. I can't really tell you anything majorly bad about it other than the fact that I don't like the Hellraiser franchise, so it was hard for me to love or even get invested in a Hellraiser movie. But there's nothing really bad about the film. I think there was a lot of negativity behind the making of the film because you had Jamie Clayton playing Pinhead, but that's not the reason this is on the list. It's just unfortunate that I didn't see enough bad movies of 2022. The only other thing I can think of is it does look kind of cheap at times, and that's about it, but it's still a decent movie. It's just unfortunate to be on the list. And at number 9 is Orphan, First Kill, another film that shouldn't really be on the list, but it is. It was a decent film, another film that did look kind of cheap, and a film that maybe shouldn't need to have been made, because I think Orphan from 2009 was so perfect that you didn't really need a backstory for the character of Esther, but we got a backstory anyway. But not only did we get a backstory, we got the same actress playing Esther as well. I didn't think that she was going to be able to pay it off, and for the most part it didn't pay off because I watched them back to back and it was kind of ridiculous to see. But at the same time, after a couple of minutes, knowing that she's playing a younger character, you accept it by the end of the movie and it was okay. And I think the film and the story itself was quite surprising, also quite fitting for a prequel to Orphan. But just like Hellraiser, it's unfortunate that I didn't see enough bad movies of 2022. And at number 8 is my best friend's Exorcism. Now, from the looks of the trailers, this looked okay. It looked kind of cheesy, but I thought I'm going to watch it anyway because why not? For the most part, it was okay. This is the last movie on the list that I thought was not bad. It was kind of cheesy. It was definitely a streaming style film, like an Amazon or a Netflix style movie. The acting wasn't great in it, but overall it wasn't a terrible movie. But I don't really have anything positive to say about it either. It was just a middle of the road horror movie that played it quite safe, but not in a great way. It just played it safe for its target audience. I'm clearly not the target audience for this film, and that's maybe why it's on the bottom 10, but it wasn't terrible. And at number 7 is Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This is when the movies do get bad. From now on, the movies are bad, and this is no exception. I don't see the need for this film, and I think one of the biggest issues I have with this movie and with other Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies that have come out recently is why didn't they just keep it with Platinum Dunes? They had a fantastic remake in 2003, an almost equally fantastic prequel to the remake in 2006. I don't know what happened after that. Did they lose the rights? Did they think that they didn't do well? I don't know, but those 2 movies were great. After that, with Leatherface in 2017, with Texas Chainsaw in 2013, and then with this abomination in 2022, there's absolutely no need. It's obvious that they were making this movie as a hopeful cash grab for what they were doing with Halloween in 2018, but as they were making this movie, there was obviously problems. The director, or the original director that started filming, left the project straight away after a couple of days shooting, and then the people that came in didn't do it any better because this film was really bad. It was so corny that it was so obvious that they were trying to ride on the coattails of the success of the 2018 Halloween movie, but it failed miserably. It failed so bad that Netflix felt sorry for them and bought it from them and then released it. And I don't even think Netflix enjoyed the film. I think Netflix just took it and released it knowing that people were going to watch it for the name alone. And that's the only reason I watched it, because of the name, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It didn't live up to anything. It was just a really bad film. And at number 6 is Studio 666. That's quite fitting for the number. I was really disappointed in this because I love the Foo Fighters. I love Dave Grohl. I think Dave Grohl is a really good actor as well. You had Jenna Ortega in this movie, so I was so intrigued to see the film. And I think the story of Studio 666 is good, but it was badly executed. It looked very cheap. It looked very nastily cheap as well. It didn't look like a movie that Foo Fighters or Dave Grohl would want to be involved in, but they did. They wanted to do it, and it didn't pay off. It just looked really bad. It looked like a fan film at times, and I was shockingly surprised as to how bad it was. Very disappointing. One of the most disappointing movies of the year for me. It would be higher on the list, as in worse, if it wasn't for some of the good acting in it, but overall a terrible film. And at number 5 is The Invitation. This is in fact the latest movie to be added on the list, and it's probably the most forgettable film on the list as well. I couldn't tell you what happened in this film. I watched it last week and I've forgotten most of it. That's how bad it was. It was a very forgettable movie. It's a vampire film. A girl goes to a wedding with a family that she found on this Ancestry.com DNA test thing, and I thought it was going to be like a racially motivated film, and it turned out it wasn't. And I would have rather they stuck with the racially motivated storyline that I thought it was going to go in, and I think they wanted us to think that, and then they hit us with vampires, and I'm like, oh, how original. And obviously at the beginning of the film there was this woman who killed herself, but she was also really strong, and they didn't explain how she was strong, so obviously there was going to be a twist somewhere in the film, and if there was going to be a twist, it would be some sort of vampire-like thing that I suspected it would be anyway, and it was. But even after that, it was a nothing story. It was kind of rubbish, and probably the most forgettable film of the year. And at number 4 is The Lair, directed by Neil Marshall. You heard that right, guys, Neil Marshall, the director of Dog Soldiers and The Descent. He gave us The Lair. I feel like Neil Marshall is better than this. If he was given more money and a better cast, I think The Lair could have been a good movie, but he was obviously limited in his budget and he was limited in the cast that he cast in the movie. It felt very cheap, it felt rushed, the story felt incomplete. I was so shocked as to how bad this film was. When I heard that Neil Marshall was bringing out another horror movie, I was like, okay, I'm interested. He's not done anything great of note lately, but you have to come back sometime, and I thought The Lair would be a decent comeback for Neil Marshall, but it turns out it was the complete opposite. I think this is the nail in the coffin for his directorial career. I think that's it over, unfortunately, unless someone can say to him, here's $100 million, give us a really good horror movie. I think he could do that, but with how bad The Lair ended up, I think that's him done. And at number 3 is Men. Now this is where we get to the bottom of the barrel of the worst of the worst, guys. Men was an abomination of a horror movie. Now I know that there will be people that have this on their top 10 best horror movies of the year, and I can understand why they would think that, and that's their opinion, and that's absolutely fine. Now first of all, this film was absolutely stunning to look at. The cinematography is some of the best cinematography I've ever seen in my life. The acting was fantastic as well, but that's not why this is at the bottom or near the bottom of my list. It's the obvious pandering and the obvious story that they're going with in this one. All men are bad, all men are the same, and they hit us on the head with it worse than they did with Black Christmas in 2019. This is the complete story that we have for Men. It's almost like they're pretending to disguise it in a mystery style horror movie with Alex Garland directing it, who's a great director, but they're hitting us over the head, pretending that they're hiding it. But after you watch this movie, if you're a man, you're the worst thing ever. And then number 2 is They, Them, or They / Them, whatever you want to call it. It's just as bad in tone to men, only this time they're honest about their storyline. They're saying this is a they them type of movie, so don't expect anything different. And I wasn't getting into it expecting anything different. I wasn't getting into it thinking they're going to try to subtly tell us that they / them or they them are supposed to be pronouns, etc. I went into the movie expecting that because I watch every movie with zero expectations in terms of I'm going to love it or I'm going to hate it. I will always give a movie a chance, and I gave They / Them a chance, and it failed because I felt like They / Them or They Them would have been a better movie if it wasn't a horror movie, because it's basically got a horror premise wrapped around it in order to get your bum on the seat to watch the movie. It is a movie that I wouldn't normally watch unless it was a horror film, and I think that's the only reason they put the horror aspect into it, is to try and get people of all backgrounds to watch the movie. It's not my type of movie, but because it was a horror film, I gave it a chance. But the horror elements of this film were atrocious. They were stupid at best. I think this movie would have been a better movie as a drama set at a summer camp with other plot points that are not horror related. I think they would have maybe got the point across better if it was that type of movie, but they marketed it for the wrong audience, in my opinion. I think it was a terrible film. If I'm rating it as a horror movie, one of the worst. And at number 1, and the worst film of the year, the worst horror film of the year, is Jeepers Creepers Reborn. Not only is it the worst horror film of the year, it's 100% the worst film of the year. And it's probably one of the worst films in general I've ever seen in my entire life. And that's why I scratch my head when people say Halloween Ends was the worst film of the year. I'm like, what? Have you even seen Jeepers Creepers Reborn? Technically, from a technical standpoint, from a story standpoint, from a cinematography standpoint, every kind of standpoint, Jeepers Creepers Reborn is the worst. It was probably filmed almost entirely on a green screen, and you can tell the green screen was terrible. My green screen is better than their green screen. There's also acting in this film that's so questionable that it's worse than a fan film. The story makes no sense whatsoever. There's a scene, well, there's this guy, can't remember his name, Mike, say, and he's a cameraman, and they're in this cemetery, and his battery dies in his camcorder. So he says, I'm going to try and find a charging point or another battery or something. So he goes into the cemetery, because that's where you go to charge your camera, I guess. And he goes into the cemetery and he disappears, or he gets killed by the creeper. But 2 minutes later, they find his body, their friends find his body, and someone says, it's still fresh. I shit you not, they say his body's still fresh. Of course it's still fresh. You saw him 2 minutes ago. How could it not be fresh? That's just one scene in this film. That's not even the worst part of the movie. Every part of this film is bad. If you thought Jeepers Creepers 3 was bad, then you've not seen Jeepers Creepers Reborn yet. Jeepers Creepers Reborn makes Jeepers Creepers 3 look like The Godfather, and I shit you not, Jeepers Creepers Reborn is the ultimate worst horror movie of 2022. So that is my top 10 worst horror movies of 2022, guys. What do you think of that? Do you agree with me? Leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think of my top 10 worst, and also give me your top 10 if you have a top 10 worst horror movies of the year. And as always, guys, thanks a lot for watching, thanks for subscribing, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.